All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have been hearing some very good things about this video. And the title, let's be honest here, it's a little crazy. The death knell of gacha games. Arknight's Endfield. And the description here is pretty spicy. Arknight's Endfield has the potential to define an entire generation of gacha games. Instead, judging by the beta test, it is being held back by an audience it was never intended for. And of course, if you look at a couple of the chapters, I believe that audience is the Hoyoverse audience. So with that, I'm interested in seeing, I assume that this person has had access to the closed beta test, they've had some actual playtime in the title, or they've done a lot of research, because boy oh boy, this is quite a thick video. And I'm excited to hear about what are these things holding it back, and what are these issues that need to be resolved for the game moving forward. Because I'm not gonna lie, I think there's a lot of great parts about Arknight's Endfield, but I think there are a couple of other things that in a lot of ways, right, could cause us some issues. I think the big one, right, is probably the base building as sort of like the main filter. But with that, let's go ahead, let's get right on into it, and let's see what good old Toboro GigaChad is on about. Holy runtime. It's already a 30-fucking-minute video, and he starts off the first 7 with the cinematic. I'm not gonna lie, this guy is either stupid or based. Maybe a little bit of both. But, I mean, at this point, did the video need more padding?
Much can be said with certainty about Arknight's Endfield after its beta test. It's got huge potential, it's going to be very popular, and this NPC is really sorry.
Really sorry, really sorry, really sorry, really sorry.
Having played...
I mean, he doesn't sound bad, though. The NPC doesn't sound bad, but holy shit, that's gonna get annoying real fast. At least they got good VAs for it.
Having played the full duration of the beta, I can confidently say that Arknight's Endfield has the potential to define a whole new generation of gacha games. That is not an exaggeration. But I really must emphasize the word potential. Because right now, I am increasingly worried that potential may never end up being realized.
Okay, so this is definitely like a super positive framing for the game. They're going ahead, they have the mindset that this is going to be a game that quite literally changes everything, but those small things are holding it back. Let's see what they are.
That very same potential could also turn the game into the biggest disappointment I've ever experienced in all my years of playing games.
Why this guy is going from like 100 to 0 so fast? Now I'm wondering, right? What could it actually be that's so fundamentally wrong with the game that it could turn it from the game that literally changes everything to the biggest disappointment ever? Like I feel like there's not really what could one thing be that does that?
Firstly, though, I really need to get the glazing out of my system, so let's just get that out of the way, shall we? There is so much that I fucking love about Endfield. Literally, from the moment you open the game, it hits you with the...
Arknights.
God, it's so good. Harking back to its roots, announcing itself to the world before greeting you with peak music just for the login screen.
See, I don't even know if that was my YouTube lagging or that was just like him screen recording the game and then the game was lagging. Yeah, that kind of fucked me up, I'm not gonna lie. This does bang, though. Oh, yeah, this goes hard. I see why this video is 30 minutes.
The satisfaction of seeing all the sprawling factory belts come together, customizing map traversal with zip lines, the activity in the Dijang with your operators working and saying hello.
You're here, Administrator. How's your day?
The view of Talos 2 from the Nexus, the phenomenal sound design.
Karmic justice! Nobody's getting...
The eerie environment and music of Valley 4.
The Marco meatball of Arknight's Endfield. I think that's pretty. I think that's pretty fair. I think the thing is with the sound design that we were hearing over here. Oh, he has a whole section. He has a whole chapter titled "Fucking Glazing." Oh my god. I think the thing with the whole sound design is that it is very like futuristic sounding. Like, I get vibes of like fucking like pulse weapons from like all of like the sci-fi series, like fucking base boosted like pulse rifles. That's kind of like the vibe that I get. I think it's definitely different. I don't know if I could go ahead and say that it's better than other things we might be hearing across other gacha titles. I think it's a different genre for me. Yeah, it's mostly a different genre for me. I don't know if I would necessarily call it better, but it's also safe to say that there aren't any really this advanced in terms of sci-fi. There really aren't like other gacha games. It's set in like a sort of like open world or have like this dynamic of a combat. Maybe like an Aether Gazer or something would be a little bit more similar. We might, yeah, that might be the comparison. But yeah, I think about some of the big gacha titles right now. They're either like a bit more low tech like ZZZ, the straight up fantasy like Genshin Impact, or they're like a little bit of a blend of both, like in Wuthering Waves. Sounds like the sound that stands make when the users call them out in JoJo Part 5. Oh, you mean like the whole... Okay, I'm never gonna do that again.
The gorgeous environment and music of Jinlong. And the headhunting. Oh my good lord, the headhunting. The music on the banner screen gets you all excited as if you're preparing for a rocket launch. You click the button, you hear those distant scintillations, and then... by far the best summoning experience in any gacha game I've ever played. Not even close.
What if I want to find out if I lost my 50-50 or if I got a 6-star or not, 5-star, whatever it is? What if I want to find out one at a time? What if I don't want to find out all of them at once? Huh? Where's the suspense there, buddy?
Oh, right, good. Got that out of my system. I have been fortunate enough to play both the alpha and beta of Endfield. In its alpha state, I was hooked. I was full of optimism and I was wholly convinced that it would be my favorite game of all time. So what changed in the beta? Thankfully, not the base. It's even better than before, and it has a ton of room to grow and become much deeper.
I guess the thing is, unfortunately, I feel like he hasn't really gotten into the parts that make it amazing. I think he pointed out like a couple of cool things, but I haven't really heard him talk about the combat yet, and we're already getting into the... Okay. Maybe that'll be later.
Of course, even though the base has a very obvious target audience, with the nature of it being a gacha game, there will inevitably be those who are simply addicted to account progression as gameplay, and will play games they would otherwise have zero interest in just to feed that addiction. For those players, rather than simplify the gameplay, which would only annoy its fans and still wouldn't be good enough for the game.
I mean, I'm personally not somebody that hates this type of gameplay. I've actually played a couple of series, like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with, like, RimWorld, or, like, fucking, I know a lot of people, they compare this to, like, Factorio. It's definitely a different vibe. There's a lot of appeal to it, to, you know, a subsection of players, or like, you know, game players. But this is kind of like something that I feel like it's an acquired taste, for sure. It's definitely an acquired taste. And it's just so far removed from typical gameplay that people might have or people might be experiencing that I'm gonna be real here. I low-key think for the game to reach a wider audience, to reach like kind of like the heights and potentially the peaks, you know, of games like ZZZ, of Wuthering Waves, of Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact, I'm not gonna lie, I feel like this sort of like they need to have like an auto mode for this, or like a way to skip it completely, because there's gonna be a lot of people that just want to play the game for like the Oonga Boonga combat and just like the progression of like building their characters and stuff. And this is kind of just, I'm not gonna lie, like if I find out I have to take like a 2-3 hour break from like the stuff that I enjoy doing, like the combat, and then I go ahead and then I just, you know, have to fucking go play an RTS game, I think it should be optional. I think that something like this should be optional. Saint and chat prove this dude is true. What does that even mean? I'm merely saying that this whole factory dynamic, it's kind of like a game inside of a game. One thing about like kind of like mandatory minigames that you might not like is that they can really turn people off from traditional gameplay. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with a title called Cyberpunk 2077, but there's this one sequence sequence early on in the game of Cyberpunk where you have to like replay like a past sequence and then like pause it at certain points and then like identify like, oh, what is like fucked up in what happened here, and then you have to play like this mini game where you're like searching for stuff. It's something like, I forget what it's called, but it's kind of like that part really throws a lot of people out of the general gameplay, which is just like an FPS. Yeah, the brain dance. The brain dances, yes. A lot of people fucking hated those. It's a polarizing thing, right? Some people like the brain dance, but some people fucking hated brain dances. And the thing is, brain dances were an acquired taste. They were something that was completely different from the original way that you were playing the game before, you know, like shooting stuff, slashing people with katanas in slow motion. And the brain dance, right, just completely takes you out of that. It was good for some people, but really bad for others. And so having optionality in those circumstances to make it more accessible, especially knowing that it's such a far cry from what the general gameplay loop is what I think is the best way to go, at least in the modern era of gaming. Think about like underwater levels in RPGs of the past. Underwater levels where like people are just like, fuck, I just like quit XYZ game at this point because the underwater level was coming up and I fucking hate fighting underwater. In a gacha game, in something where you want like player retention, where you're not getting like $60, $70, $80 MSRP just for people to play it, you know, like what happened with a game like Cyberpunk, I do feel like having something like this and not giving more optionality could be a major issue. I personally don't have a trouble with this. This is gameplay that I can like get along with. I wouldn't find any trouble. Like, I actually do like optimizations. Guys, I play games like Total War. Like, I play games like Civilization. I play games like Total War Warhammer. Stuff like that. Like, I am familiar with, like, base building and, like, optimizing resources, that sort of stuff. I just understand that there's going to be a big subsection of the populace, especially those that might be migrating over from, like, Hoyo games. They might not fucking like being forced to do something like this. 1,000,000%.
Zero interest in, just to feed that addiction. For those players, rather than simplify the gameplay, which would only annoy its fans and still wouldn't be good enough for the gacha addicts, they instead created these wacky inflatable tube guys, which you then have to murder in cold blood, which unlocks a bunch of tutorials for it. They are quite possibly the most needlessly hand-holding tutorials I've ever had to do, but I don't mind their existence at all if it means they can keep cooking and make it deeper, more complex, and even more fun and satisfying in the future. And for those who are hoping for just another account progression dopamine machine, who lament the mere thought of meaningfully engaging with the base at all, fear not, there is actually an easy solution. Don't play it.
I mean, is that the video? Do we just stop watching here? Is that it, ladies and gentlemen? I mean, he isn't wrong. Everything doesn't have to appeal to everybody. It's annoying as fuck. That's why games are dying now. This is the viewpoint that I have. I personally view a lot of what's in Endfield as actually very accessible to like the casual sort of player base. And the thing is that I view this in a lot of ways as like how Wuthering Waves was for Kuro games. Think about PGR to Wuwa, and how so much stuff in Wuwa was made more simple. They removed things like the colored orbs. They made the combat kind of like slower overall. They made it a lot more accessible. Had a combination of like easy to play teams while also having like sweatier teams. And the game is so much more popular to a wider audience and is still able to retain the original fans from PGR at the same time. And so the way that I view it is Wuthering Waves, right? Way bigger total audience. It's still able to attract the giga sweaty players from PGR, but it's also able to attract a more casual audience at the same time. And I'm personally of the viewpoint that Wuwa didn't lose or sacrifice a lot to get that to happen. And the thing with Endfield is that there's so much stuff in it that's going to appeal to a casual audience, make a casual audience super happy. And it's like, there's just these things like base building that I feel like, if not streamlined or made more optional, is just going to be a massive turnoff to a lot of potential players. And the way that I view it, guys, is the more casual friendly your game is, simply the more money it's going to make. And the more money it makes, the better updates the devs can do. And I mean, let's Let's just be entirely honest here, right? I don't see a problem with opening a bit wider of a casual net because the game's gonna get more money. The game's simply gonna have, you know, it might stray away from like the true vision that people are having. But assuming that the devs aren't Hoyoverse, where instead of reinvesting their profits from the game back into the game, they spend it on shit like nuclear reactors. Most devs reinvest the money into their game and make it astronomically better, like what Wuthering Waves did for version 2.0. It turns out that yes, appealing to a casual audience like what WuWa did in 2.0, boy oh boy, you can get some really, really good stuff out of it. Then tell me why some of the best games nowadays are indie games. I still think passion in making what the devs want is greater than conforming to people's demands just for more money in terms of making a better game. This is the thing, Fob. I don't think that there needs to be a huge amount done when it comes to Endfield and the base building, or, you know, Endfield and the things that turn it off from a casual audience to still retain a lot of like the passion and the feel. I think that there's like a difference between like dumbing down the game completely for a wider audience while still like, you know, potentially removing or just adjusting mechanics that make it more palatable for a general player base. Think about like Wuthering Waves. Again, I'll bring it up again as an example. Wuthering Waves could have been made way more fucking casual. Giga fucking casual, right? They just remove parries from the game. They adjust how dodges work. They don't even have holograms in the game because getting one shot in content like that is just too frustrating for casual players. There could have been so much more that the devs could have done to make it the most like casual friendly game ever. And I personally view it as concessions that the devs make so that they can have a wider player base, but they can still definitely 1000% retain the original feel and spirit of the game. I think the only thing they need to do is just make a base blueprint system that lets people copy someone else's base as long as you have all the materials. Kind of like Genshin's teapot blueprint system. If someone's too casual for that, they should just uninstall. Honestly, maybe they have like some pre-made layouts that like are suboptimal, but they get the job done. And then players can decide to take like those pre-made layouts, grind them, right? Like grind the Factorio. I know it's crazy. We're agreeing with the Fob take. This is like something rare once in a blue moon. Yeah, I mean, this like that's the thing, guys. I'm not saying remove the base building, but remove the friction of learning the base building and getting it actually working in the first place, right? And actually like getting those materials, getting that flow of different products to different places. It's just, there's a lot of people that are just dumb, right? There's a lot of people that are just like kind of dumb or just don't want to like look up a guide or like how to do this one feature in the game. It's all about minimizing the points of friction that could cause somebody to just put the game down and not want to play it anymore. For example, think about it this way, guys. If every enemy in WuWa in the early game was capable of one-shotting you, and you basically got forced to like learn how to get good or dodge, or you cannot clear the story, that would probably get a lot of people to quit the game. It would really appeal to like a hardcore audience because you'd be like, oh my god, I gotta play like a fucking freak. If I want to just do the story, I gotta get good or uninstall. It's like, you know, like you don't have to do that, right? And then maybe have an option for the sweatier base building that's available in the end game and gives you like a couple of extra things, just like how holograms exist in WuWa. You don't get a huge amount, right, for doing hologram 6s. You get the feeling of accomplishment. Just do something similar like that for the base building. But hear me out. If less people play the game, we'll have less dumb people in the community, so you won't have dumbass Twitter takes about the game or weird-ass normie virtue signaling. All right, okay, elitist master. Simmer down a little bit, elitist master. It's just...
Gates closed. The Endfield train has departed. See you later, buddy boy.
Unfortunately though, in spite of everything I've mentioned so far, Enfield has made what I feel are very significant mistakes. Pretty much all of
There is a reason PGR didn't get as big as it could. Don't turn WoW into PGR.
You want to know one thing that would turn WoW into PGR? Resetting holograms. Resetting holograms is something that I genuinely think would kill Wuthering Waves. I'm gonna be entirely real there. I do think resetting holograms would kind of kill WoW. Where now it's like, okay, buddy boy, if you don't know how to play this one type of content, right, where everything one-shots you, you're gonna miss out on all your astrite. I'm gonna be real here. I do think that is the correct take. And let's be honest, there's a reason why The Kuro devs, in almost a year since launch, they have not decided to reset holograms. They've only decided to add new ones. There's a reason why, guys. Because they probably know a lot of people are gonna feel the need to, like, quit the game because they can't complete this content and they're not getting Asteroid. Nah, fuck you. Make people do hologram again. Delete TOA. Make hologram the... Okay, alright, S6. Alright, S6 R5 Master. Okay, R5 Master.
Pretty much all of them are fixable. These are far from permanent. But in general, beta tests tend to look pretty similar to their full release versions. So let's dive in. The main story is, to put it bluntly, bad. There's no nuance at all. Landbreakers are completely one-dimensional and...
What? Wait, is it really? Is the Enfield story this... Is it the Enfield story really this bad? Like, bro's just like... Bro spent, like, at least 3 solid minutes glazing the fuck out of the game, and then the first thing he says about the story is that it's just not good. That's crazy.
uninteresting, just generic bad guys who want you dead. Compare them to Reunion from the Arknight's main story. They're introduced to us as fighting for the same goal as Rhodes Island, that being to liberate the infected, but with very different methods. There is a clear conflict. I understand the motivations of the antagonists and how they ended up where they are. Landbreakers have none of this. We also know almost nothing about the aims or motivations of the main villain Neferith, who might just
She looks kind of cool, though.
be one of the most toothless villains I have ever seen. With the sole exception of one line when you first meet her, she shows up from time to time, says some vague bullshit, and fucks off again. How on earth can
You mean like every gray antagonist that you think at first is a bad guy, but is actually secretly a good guy that's gonna help you? I think we already know a lot of characters in gacha games that act exactly like this. We had the Kafkas, we had the Scaramushis, we had the Scars and the Camellias. They all kind of just do the exact same fucking shit like this. I don't know if this is necessarily... I mean, obviously, right, I haven't experienced it firsthand, but the way that he's describing it is kind of true to, like, a lot of other games.
this be written by Hypergriff, the same people who gave us Patriot and Tallulah? They can very reasonably fix all of these issues before the game's release, but the alpha story wasn't good either, so I'm not convinced they will. I have no issue with the notion of a simple story well told, but that does not describe Enfield's story at all. And it's not just the writers who are at fault. At one point, Chen refers to Neferith as Nephi, which I found extremely weird. Why is she giving the main villain a friendly nickname? Turns out this is because in every single language except English, Chen says essentially the equivalent of Nefer something or Nefer whatever, because the name went over her head. It's a subtle way of adding to her characterization. Instead,
The subtle way of characterizing Chen as stupid? That's kind of based.
the English translators collectively hotboxed their entire office and decided Chen is actually giving her the kind of cute nickname you'd normally give to close friends. I am astounded at how incompetent this is, but then again, these are the same translators who translated cold to cryo, for no reason in particular, I'm sure. Most of the dialogue is also exasperating.
You should feel lucky, because I am the only one who can take care of technical problems like this.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, that's bad. I'm gonna be real here. That's kind of bad. Wow, that's worse than Wuthering Waves. Wait, why is nobody talking about this? This is actually worse than that's worse than Woo-Wah. That's worse than Woo-Wah 1.0. What the fuck? Out of context? I don't even think you can use the word out of context. I don't think the context matters. I don't think the context matters when the line sounds like that.
Say no more. Stop moving already and do something about that ether side rupture.
Ether side. Do something about that ether side rupture.
Before it gets any worse.
Guys, writers, please! Is it too much to ask not to be treated like an idiot? Who could your target audience possibly be for this dialogue such that you
AI voice? AI Knights.
feel the need to explicitly state the obvious multiple times and make sure everything is repeated very slowly for clarity? Oh, motherfucker! Consistent with the emerging trend of disappointing writing, frustratingly are the characters. Not because their writing is bad per se, but because there's just so much wasted potential. For example, Ember is a Sancta and Shaihi is a Sarkaz. We know from the Arknight story that the Sancta and the Sarkaz are seemingly always in conflict with each other due to what the Sarkaz see as the Sancta's betrayal. An image of a Sarkaz and a Sancta holding hands was very prominent in Arknight's 4th concept trailer as a holy shit moment because its meaning was so significant.
Haha, look, it's the angels and the demons.
Meanwhile, the only mention of something even slightly resembling a connection to this lore is one line in Ember's file saying, The children born and raised in Talos 2 would never learn that angels and sanctum used to carry beautiful meanings in times past. If I'm interpreting this correctly, this is the writer's way of saying that the entire history of Terra, all the extraordinary, catastrophic, mountain-moving events that directly led to Terran races ending up on Talos 2, not important. None of it matters anymore. I am so disappointed in the writers. What a monumental waste of such an incredible wealth of lore at your disposal.
Is this like factually confirmed? Could what he's saying right now simply be built off of like the idea of just what he's experienced in the story? Is there a chance that he's only like scratching the surface with his breakdown of the lore here and that it's actually going to get expanded on more in the future? Like as you just play the game? I guess that's the thing, right? I'm not entirely sure like if you're actually able to make the call right now.
All that being said though, I must admit, I do love the fact the resident Australian, Aviwena, says verbatim, "Burden beast piss. How does it taste like?"
This is the thing, right? I'm not even somebody that's necessarily like going in with the mindset to like defend Endfield or like defend anything that's going on with this game. I'm hearing some of these like significant mistakes and stuff like that, and I'm not entirely sure if they're like completely valid right now. Maybe I'm the one that's doing a little bit too much like counter glazing.
How does it taste like? Crikey fucking bloody oath, Sheila, you piss drinking cunt. Despite nearly all the writing being a massive letdown, I want to make it explicitly clear the voice actors, thankfully, are actually good at their job and have done marvelous work with the material they've been given. I'm a huge fan of Aviwena, Dapan, and Wolfguard's regional accents.
Oh, of course. You're the boss. You point the way.
Not a problem. Leave it to me.
And on top of that, the animations are way more expressive, the models are outstanding, and their idle chatter adds a ton of...
Idealism is always detached from reality.
I do like Arknight's Enfield's model design, but I'm not gonna lie, I feel like the texture, everything looks like it's made out of plastic or vinyl. Everything, like even her dress over here that's like on fire, it looks like it's going to have like fumes. Like toxic fumes coming out of it. It is like a little bit too plastic looking. I do think that they could improve the textures a little bit because like the skin and like the faces and stuff look fine. It's just the clothes to me. The clothes to me look like wax. It's a little weird.
And it's the first step towards disappointment.
Thank you, Wolfguard. Also, just one more thing. I am no prude. I am a straight man who plays gacha games. I'm not gonna pretend not to like fan service. But guys, holy fuck, relax. Subtlety is dead.
See, this is how I know this game is trying to appeal to a wider audience.
Humanity is cooked. Have mercy on my soul. Guide me from the wayward woman, Lord Jesus. Now, as I said before, everything I have mentioned so far is fixable. Bad writers can be replaced and characters can be
Stop it. Just stop replaying that fucking line.
given good writing later on, which is why all of this is negligible compared to the #1 issue I have with Arknight's Endfield in its beta state, because it is not fixable once it is released. In order to get there, we first need to talk about combat.
Okay.
Combat in Endfield for the most part revolves around skills and skill points. Use a shared SP bar to trigger a battle skill, which in theory triggers a combo skill, which triggers even more of them, and so on. Combo skills are essentially just QTEs with extra steps that deal damage. You press E when the prompt shows up and it gets the neurons going. Basic attack strings essentially serve as the cost of getting a final strike, which is the last hit in the sequence. Final strikes restore SP, so for the most part you really want to be getting the full sequence of basic attacks to that end. That logic generally applies to the combat as a whole. Given the importance of skills, you want to be maximizing SP restoration, hence the prevalence of Arclight in nearly every team composition. Her individual damage may not be anything noteworthy, but her ability to generate SP is excellent, and more SP means more damage. I'm honestly kinda surprised she isn't a 6-star. Now, the beta also adds the ability to dodge.
Okay, so if you don't have SP, go fuck yourself, the game. That's kind of Arknight's Endfield combat. If you don't have SP, kind of just go fuck yourself. And the one character that batteries SP like crazy is a must slot on every team. Is it like ZZZ Energy? I assume it's like a ZZ, it's sort of similar to ZZZ Energy. It's just the 3 bars of SP are shared across your entire squad.
Due to the nature of final strikes being your primary way of restoring SP, you need to commit to the full sequence of basic attacks to get it, which means
Okay, that sounds not. That's like every character in the game being like Verena, where you have to complete an entire fucking basic attack chain to generate her Forte circuit. And there's like no other way. Oh, that's a little rough.
Means currently there is still very much a choice every time an enemy attacks you of either dodging or taking the hit, and the dodge is often not the best move. But it still gives me cause for concern. Future 6 stars are inevitably going to be designed to take advantage of more and more gameplay mechanics. Right now, the dodge only exists as a means of survival rather than facilitating damage. But if a dodge exists in any capacity, there is a very real danger of them leaning much further into it by, say, having a 6-star with a combo skill triggered by a dodge, and then more units with kits centered around dodging who synergize with that 6-star, and a new 6-star whose basic attacks don't get interrupted by the dodge, and before long you'll end up with a player base wanting more and more action, understandably seeking to flex their ADHD action gamer reflexes as their expression of skill.
I'm gonna be real here. I think having an entire like gameplay loop revolving around dodges is actually genuinely one of the worst things you can do for a character's design. Where if the only way for them to deal damage is to dodge and attack, that is actually genuinely awful, because now that character's performance is entirely dependent on what type of enemy you're facing. And so the way that Wuwa does it is actually just good, where after you do a dodge in Wuwa and then you attack, you get like a shortened attack animation, or like you advance forward multiple spots into your attack chain, and then you're able to do like the highest damaging part of your attack chain. You get access to it a lot faster. In this game, I genuinely have no idea why after a dodge you don't like get the skill point, or like you advance to the part of the attack chain that gives you the skill point. Like I'm 99% sure that would make the combat in this game feel so much better, because people were just talking about, right, to get the skill points in this game you have to like complete the full attack chain. Just make a dodge like shorten that if they follow up with an attack afterwards. Very I feel like it's kind of like a very simple way of fixing it up.
Reflexes as their expression of skill. But with Enfield's base building being the way it is, and with the fact that they didn't dumb down the actual substance of the base building at all since the alpha, the vision the Enfield team had was clearly aimed at the kind of player who likes to obsess over details, who may not necessarily want something based on reflexes, but instead something more strategic, controlled and precise. The base obviously appeals to this kind of player, while the combat has ended up with a sort of identity crisis. Unsure of what it really wants to look like, trying to be a bit of everything while never actually excelling at any of them. Most of the strategy comes from the team comps rather than the execution. The actual process of triggering combos and doing damage and so on, while satisfying for a while, is very easy. Use a battle skill or two, do your basic attack string, face tank smaller hits, use combo skills on cooldown, and repeat. I quickly exhausted every single possibility for improvement, and even self-limiting clears like duos and solos are not at all challenging.
It sounds a little bit like Genshin to me. And hear me out. It sounds a little bit like Genshin to me, because most of the complexity in Genshin's combat isn't what you're actually doing on the battlefield. It is 900% how you're building together the team comps. That to me is sort of like how Genshin's combat works. It's the combination of the elements that you're using, and it's really honestly, right, how HSR kind of works as well, right? Because you build the right team or you go fuck yourself. And if Enfield is in the situation where it's like you build the right team or you go fuck yourself, you know, it's a tried and tested true formula. It works. It's shown to have worked in the past. I just don't know if this is something that, I don't know, we'll have to see. We'll just have to see how they flesh out the roster. But I can see a future where a lot of characters and a lot of supports, a lot of different team compositions end up getting like pigeonholed into like certain ways to do things. Just like how HSR right now, let's be real here, 90% of HSR's complexity is literally just the team building. The devs for that game have gotten themselves into quite a deep fucking hole in terms of like all of the issues that the game's gonna have because of how they've designed their team building. 1,000,000%.
I died more often to platforming than to enemies. This is mostly due to the current cast of enemies lacking any real variety or complexity. Sure, it will improve with time, but the state of the game at launch has real implications for the future of the game. Hypergriff has been through these motions before. Today, more than 5 years after its launch, Arknights is known for its meaningfully challenging endgame modes to the point of Chinese universities hosting nationwide Arknights tournaments.
Yeah, so the reason why I say Arknights is like niche outside of China is kind of like this. I genuinely have no idea what even happened for this game in CN to be like this big in CN, but then in like, you know, global, to have like not even a fraction of the popularity that it does in CN. It's like not even close what goes on in CN. It's fucking crazy. This is ridiculous. A fucking gacha game. It's like literally pay to win university gacha game team.
Thousands of dollars in prize money. I've kept playing for all these years because Arknights has such a rich endgame and high skill ceiling, but for a long time it didn't. When it first launched, the most interesting gameplay it had to offer was Chapter 4. It took them years to make integrated strategies a permanent game mode. But the difference is Arknights didn't offer anything else in terms of gameplay. There was nothing else to play the game for. With Endfield, Hypergriff seems to have regressed into doing the same thing by making it frustratingly shallow in its launch state, but doing so this time is a critical mistake. Those who are looking for strategic depth will not find it. It is pathetically easy, and it will remain that way for at least the first 6 months or so. Which means once those players have completed their bases, which really doesn't take that much time, they may not stick around for that long. But those who are looking for action will get plenty of it from daily and weekly gameplay, regardless of the difficulty. The ability to dodge not only gives those action-seeking players their daily dose of dopamine, but also significantly diminishes the need for healing. If their overworld healing needs can be met with items you can craft directly from the backpack, and the 4-star like Snowshine can provide literally all my healing needs with room to spare anyway, what reason does the action-seeking player have to engage with the base at all?
Well, this is the thing. You could use the logic of just dodge, bro, for everything, but let's be real here. A lot of people that play games suck. A lot of people that play games are actually like really bad at them. Especially when it's like a mobile game, when it's like something that's a little bit more accessible, kind of geared towards more like a casual player base. In Genshin, you can literally just dodge everything. But there's also a reason why Zhongli is one of the most popular banners in the game, because he lets you kind of just play without ever using the dodge button, because it's hard to use sometimes for a certain group of players. You can play sustainless teams in Genshin, right? Perfectly fine if you know how to like dodge everything, but not a lot of people do that. Not a lot of people do that at all. And so I wouldn't necessarily be sure that this is like sort of like a major point for the game, if I'm being honest.
With the base at all. The outposts are optional. All they need at that point is some components to make gear. This, combined with the lack of strategic depth in its launch state, creates a serious risk of cultivating a majority of players who are exclusively invested in the action gameplay.
Isn't that exactly what I was saying at the start of the video? Isn't that exactly what I was saying at the start of the video, right? They have this blend of like action combat, the thing that's going to draw in a lot of players from, you know, past titles from like some of the most popular gacha games there are. And unfortunately, right, that's going to lead to a lot of people really being turned off by that fucking RTS Factorio resource management base building. I don't think it's bad that it's in the game. It's just got to be more accessible.
This will be a controversial take, but I would not be making this video were I not willing to defend it. I think the best decision Endfield could possibly make after the beta is to remove the dodge entirely.
What?
Hypergriff's development decisions will be driven by what players want, and if the vast majority of players aren't engaging with the base, the game's evolution will reflect that. This is my #1 issue with the game. They are creating a precarious combination of action gameplay in the combat alongside the slower gameplay of the base. We already have an example of such a precarious combination in a gacha game failing to hold in Zenless Zone Zero's TV mode. It is an action game, it was advertised as an action game. Lo and behold, the action gamers didn't like the TV mode, and Hoyoverse decided to all but kill the TV mode entirely.
And the game is 1,000,000 trillion times better for it.
The difference, though, is that Zenless Zone Zero was built from the ground up around its dodge and parry mechanics. It is fundamentally an action game. That is where its strengths lie, and that decision was an act of leaning further into those strengths. Endfield, on the other hand, has been built from the ground up around the base, yet it is taking clear steps towards action gameplay. Obviously, they aren't going to kill off the base entirely, you might as well announce end of service at that point, but I am convinced Endfield is sleepwalking into doing something not all that far removed. If the game cultivates a player base who are seeking action, then as more and more regions are introduced, each one asking the player to build a new base from scratch, those action-seeking players will complain, and being the majority of the player base, there is a serious danger of Hypergriff pivoting to action gameplay for that reason.
Wouldn't that be kind of Is that such a bad thing? If that's what a majority of the players are doing, and they're trying to make the game as successful as possible, wouldn't it sort of make more sense to flesh out the action parts even more? I guess it's like, it's a balance between being niche. I think Kaiser is saying it's like an identity crisis. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I would be in the boat of taking the dodge mechanic and fleshing it out even more and making it an actual part of the combat instead of something that kind of is just like, okay, you dodge the damage, but then nothing happens afterwards. I think his approach of removing the dodge entirely, I'm not like, it would just make the combat, it would turn the combat into something that's an afterthought versus the base being an afterthought. I personally view this as something that would just like remove the itch for like action-oriented players to engage with the game. I don't know if that's a good thing.
And we have already seen that Hypergriff is perfectly willing to let you sidestep most of the strategy in their strategy game, so long as you pay up. But for the same reason Hoyoverse's attempts at strategy have been absolute dogshit, Hypergriff would not even hold a candle to developers with mature and polished action gameplay systems. Removing the dodge and doubling down on strategic gameplay solves this problem and gives them the space to build on Enfield's strengths and create something truly phenomenal. It is by far the best decision they can make for the longevity of the game. Instead, they are trying to steer it in two different directions simultaneously. One towards that vision they so clearly had a year ago, and one towards appealing to a wider, more general audience.
Alpha gameplay that's a lot more strategic. This is the viewpoint that I have, knowing the exact track record of what the devs have done. I would view the devs' decision to turn the game more action-oriented, to making the game feel like a little bit more alive in the combat and a little bit more like hands-on in the combat, as like a conscious decision for the devs to like reach again that wider audience, to reach and have the game be more successful as a whole. I think that the big revamp that Hypergriff did for this title in particular, I mean, they did it for a reason. I think that their goal with Enfield is to break the normie barrier, to not really be as niche as the Arknights genre is on the global side. Like, this is their attempt to capture more of like that Hoyo action-oriented sort of audience. If they've already put this much work from like one alpha to the beta, and they've like done this much to rewire the game so that it feels more alive in the combat, I get like, is the solution to literally like just go backwards when I assume the feedback that they got was to make the game more like the beta? I don't know how I feel about that one. I think that's a little bit of a strange way to go for it.
If we're being honest with ourselves though, we all know what general audience really means. Let's not pretend otherwise. It means the Hoyoverse audience.
Yep.
Obviously, there's nothing wrong with playing Hoyoverse games. This does not mean every single Hoyoverse fan ever. The problem is with those who do not see each game as having a unique identity appealing to different kinds of players, but rather they see 3D anime RPG gacha game as a genre in itself. And yes, that does include you, Wuthering Waves fans. Hoyoverse and Kuro games both have their roots in action gameplay, while Hypergriff's roots are in strategy. And yet, there are still those who make the argument that trying to be like Genshin or like Wuthering Waves or whatever is a good thing because they're the most popular gacha, and for some reason, popularity is the only thing that matters to these people. I'm going to make what may seem like a strange analogy at first, but just trust me on this. When Gangnam Style released in 2012,
What the fuck? Okay, let's see where this one's going.
it was a global phenomenon. It became the first video to reach 1 billion views on YouTube, and just like that, the Korean pop industry was catapulted into the mainstream. More than a decade after that phenomenon, do we now have a thriving industry consisting solely of songs that are like Gangnam Style? Sounds a bit silly, doesn't it? Psy did not stumble upon some magic formula for success which can be repeated forever with the right balance of ingredients, and Psy has explicitly said this himself.
You know, I cannot call this success because this is called phenomena, and which means I don't do anything. People do it, right? So this was by people, not by me.
K-pop is the
Bro seems shockingly humble.
leviathan of an industry it is today, not because everybody copied Gangnam Style, but because people took advantage of the opportunities Gangnam Style opened up. Fast forward to 2020 and Genshin Impact becomes a global phenomenon, catapulting gacha games into the mainstream. MiHoYo put some forward-thinking people at the wheel, quickly built a brand identity, renaming themselves Hoyoverse, and now, 5 years later, Hoyoverse has found unfathomable sustained success. But again, this is not because they found some magic formula, but because they took advantage of the opportunity.
Why didn't he put the clip of Balatro winning over ZZZ? He should have capped it off with the whole Balatro winning over ZZZ and Muba. He should have put that in there.
But again, this is not because they found some magic formula, but because they took advantage of the opportunities brought about by the phenomenon that was and is Genshin Impact. This is what people so often miss when they insist that every new gacha game needs to be like some other gacha game. Of course, this is no concern for enlightened and experienced 3D anime RPG gacha game enthusiasts like ourselves. I'm sure our judicious and learned beta testers have provided invaluable feedback to the developers. Shall we peruse a few of them? Dash feels underwhelming. It should be more forgiving and have more iframes. It's not to my liking because of my action RPG experiences. You don't say! Game needs a proper dodge, and anyone who says otherwise is coping. A quick look around the gacha space makes this abundantly clear. Not being able to dodge cancel makes the overall combat loop feel unsatisfying because you're forced to take hits that could have been avoided. Yeah, dodging definitely needs rework, like larger iframes for casuals and consecutive dodges, and dodges not breaking your basic attack combo, and more dodging distance, and making dodges more rewarding, and make SP boss 4 instead of 3. It would make combat faster. Please.
Is it wrong that I feel like a lot of the suggestions that I've heard sound pretty valid and like not bad for the game? I understand the point of view that he has, but I don't feel like the things that were being mentioned or suggested were that bad at all. I'm gonna be entirely real here. I feel like those were completely reasonable.
Make normal attacks more powerful, and also make each hit give SP, and also stagger, and also please give SP whenever I dodge.
What's wrong with those? Those sound pretty okay to me. He said it in a stupid voice, so it's stupid. It's a strategy type game, not an action game. Why is it not an action game? When the devs have intentionally changed the game from alpha to beta, and they made it an action game over the strategy game that it was in the alpha. Does that not make it qualify as an action game? That's the problem. Why is it a problem? I guess nobody has explained why it's a problem. I feel like what I've heard in this video is that the mechanics in the action combat aren't up to par to other games. And so instead of simply improving the action part of the combat so it's more up to par with other games, he's saying just remove the action part of the combat completely, when I don't really see why you couldn't just make the action part better.
Also, please make dodges use less stamina. Also, so far so good, but it feels like some essential features are missing, like iframe rolls and parrying and deflecting. Hey, remember what I said about players wanting more and more action if a dodge exists? Make SP boss 4 instead of 3, and make it recharge faster. Right now, there's no incentive to swap to another character during combat. It cancels the animation and doesn't change the position. I hope they make it more like Wuthering Waves. Oh, here we go, boys, buckle up! Combat's already way better than with the technical test. Being too different will scare new players away. They changed it from the technical test for a reason. But this is my view as someone who's played lots of recent gacha games like Genshin Impact, Zenless Zone Zero, and Wuthering Waves, but never the original Arknights. By the way, there is Girls Frontline 2 for a more top-down strategic approach, which is exactly why I'm not playing it. Here are some exploration options in the competitors I've played. Genshin Impact, the game should tell me which weapon to put on my character, like in Zenless Zone Zero. Also, the game should tell me which gear to put on my character, like in Zenless Zone Zero. Overworld exploration feels kind of slow. A good example of how to make it better would be Wuthering Waves. Right now, this feels like a certain game where the combat is you running around and combining different skills to get the reaction. Damn, that's...
Did he like take meth before recording this part? It feels like the creator of this video was like on something before he like started diving into this feedback section. Genuinely. Like, this is a long time to be talking like that.
Crazy, I wonder why. Jump feels too short and floaty. It would be great to increase the height or allow a double jump. They would have to redo all the geometry. What do you mean? This is especially important because of improvements to exploration the competition has been making. Oh, will you please fuck off? It would be great if they considered adding platforming abilities like a double jump and wall climbing and swimming and
these people are just trying to make the game better. It's not like people have an infinite amount of time to do something every day, right? It's not like people can just decide, okay, I'm gonna play every single gacha game ever. If you're playing one game, that means that the time that you're spending in one game, you're not spending it in another game. And people aren't going to play every single gacha on the market. And so if there's one that does things a lot better than others, and then that's the reason why a game isn't played, then it's just like, I don't really understand like why all of these suggestions, some of them are questionable, right? But a majority of them seem like perfectly valid and are looking to just make the game better. Why are we shitting on the feedback this hard? Why are we shitting on feedback and suggestions to improve and fix the game and make it more accessible to the audience that's clearly trying to capture? How is there this much toxic positivity before the game is even released?
The grappling hook, it's one of the fun aspects of open world games. It's not an open world game!
It kinda is. You show Arknight's Enfield gameplay to like 90% of players, and they'll be like, yeah, this looks like an open world game. Why? I'm a little confused here. It's just like we're taking the default perception of the game as like an open world with exploration. I understand it's like segmented open world, but it's just like, why are we just saying it's not these things that it's clearly marketing itself as?
For crying out loud! All the big open world gacha games let you carry over the pity, so this system will not bode well for most of the mainstream gacha community. Well,
this is merely mentioning that having a pity that doesn't carry over is not good. That's objectively true. Having a system where your pity and the pulls that you spent building up to pity can evaporate into thin air is not good for the player. Yes, 120 hard pity is better than 180 for a 100% guaranteed character. That is true. But what can also be true is if that 120 pity allows a player to actually have 100 of their pulls disappear into thin air, that's also not good. Both can be true. It can be true that there's a 120 pity, and it can also be true the fact that your pity can just disappear into thin air. That can also be bad. Both can be true at the same time. Like, you're allowed to have one without having the other.
Can bloody well fuck off then! People need to learn how to...
How about you pull only if you have 120? How about they just change the gacha so you don't have to do that? What would be the issue here? Why are people so against the idea that the gacha could simply be changed so that the pity rolls over? I don't understand what is so crazy about that idea. I'm saying that the main big gacha games, they don't have the ability for your pulls to actually just disappear and become completely useless and worthless. Arknights has a situation where a player can theoretically actually just waste 119 pulls. Having that sort of trap in the game, and then everyone just saying,
oh, just strategize your pulls better so you don't fall into this trap.
It's like, why is the trap there in the first place? Why is there something that players have to actively navigate around to not like legitimately like brick their account? Why not just remove the opportunity for a player to brick their account and just make it more like friendly for the entire player base so that there's not like a gigantic trap hole that they can fall into and legitimately waste a fuck ton of their pulls? I don't understand why people are so defensive over that part of the system when removing it straight up just removes a huge issue that a player could potentially face. I know there's a workaround for it, but it kind of doesn't make that much sense why it's there in the first place, and it is going to fuck over a random casual, and they're probably going to quit the game because of it.
Out! All the big open world gacha games let you carry over the pity, so this system will not bode well for most of the mainstream gacha community. Well, they can bloody well fuck off then! People need to learn how to skip ban.
Like, yeah. Don't like it, don't play the game. I'm gonna be real here. This entire section is just, it feels a little weird to me. This entire section feels really weird to me. It's just, how is there this much toxic positivity in the game before it's even released? This is absolutely fucking nuts.
Bloody well fuck off then! People need to learn how to skip banners. This is stupid advice. Just look at this example from You just wanted to be more like Hoyoverse. And they're the most popular gacha, period. Not carrying over the guarantee in a game competing with I only build up pity if there is a character I really want dupes for. The concept of dupes is already questionable. Looking at Genshin I know very few people that play Arknights, but dozens that play Hoyo and Kuro games. This is a lie. You know people who play one Kuro game. It is Wuthering Waves specifically. Don't fucking lie to me!
I hope he's gonna like say that like this section was a joke, because it's getting weirder and weirder as the video goes on.
About what your competition does in business. Oh my god, you people!
Like, is it's a little strange to get this mad about feedback because the only reason why anybody is typing anything into this forum is because they think it's going to make the game better. Getting this mad about somebody's suggestion to make the game better? I just don't think it's something that, like, happens very often, or I don't think it's a very, like, normal thing to do. It's like, you go to, like, a restaurant, you order a burger, and then somebody's like, oh, you know what, restaurant owner Billie Jean? I think your burger could be a lot better if you add some sesame seeds onto your buns. And then some other dude in the corner of the restaurant who really doesn't like sesame seeds on his buns starts like fucking screaming at you and just telling you to leave the entire fucking restaurant and that you're like stupid and dumb and you don't have any idea what you're talking about. Just leave the restaurant if you want that sesame seed so much. It's just like, that's what it feels like. It's so weird. This is a weird video. I'm gonna be entirely real here.
People are insufferable. I keep pulling after I get the character to build pity, but that's now a mistake in this game. You have a gambling addiction! Building pity is not a thing! In my—
What's wrong with somebody wanting to build pity? You do realize that a core part of the gameplay loop for a lot of players is engaging with the gacha system. And if there's a system in your game that basically is like denying players access to a core part of their gameplay loop, I don't like... Gacha is a big part of gacha games. And so having a system where like the only way to really play the game is to just not engage with the gacha, unless like, you know, you don't engage with the gacha except at just like one time every couple of months. You can't go for early pulls. You never pull until you have 120 or you just go fuck yourself. And it's like, okay, well, a lot of people are coming from games like Wuwa, Genshin, HSR, ZZZ, where sometimes like they can just be like, oh, I kind of want this character, but I haven't saved up. Maybe I'll just throw a random 10 pull at it and I'll get it. And in Arknight's Endfield, doing that is basically akin to just bricking your account. In those other titles, you know that you're going to be building up to another pity that goes over from banner to banner, so it's not a big deal. And I guess these people really want and are like set on the idea that you just pull once every couple of months. I mean, there's just people saying that pulling once every couple of months isn't as fun to them. And so they're suggesting changes to make the game more fun to them. Like, do we have to get this mad about it? It's a weird video.
My ideal gacha system, there is no 50-50 system at all. Just a banner with X pulls to get it guaranteed, and a higher chance to get it at X pulls. This is literally the Enfield system, you idiot! Mark my words, if this system goes live with no changes, the player base from competitors of this game will absolutely not play long term. Bear in mind, by the way, this is just from the Discord server. There will be far more of this in the private feedback surveys. I want to highlight one more post, however, in which two testers state similar concerns to mine and are met with a rather depressing response. The first tester says, "Currently there are a lot of action elements, but the battles don't feel exciting. I think the battle system in the technical test might be more enjoyable. When it comes to action, other companies' games are more refined, and the current system just feels like an inferior version of them, which is just annoying." The second agrees. There are some opinions that it's plain compared to other games, but Enfield is differentiated from others and is interesting in its own way. So I don't want it to be swayed by those opinions and make it feel too action-oriented. If the dodge window is too lenient, it'll just become a dodging action game. While the third tester, eloquently summing up the vast majority of the feedback, says, "I agree with increasing the action element. The reason is simple, it will attract a wider range of players." This, essentially, is the mindset of people who keep asking for the game to be something it's not. They have no concept of carving out a niche in the market or—
No. That's not what people are doing. The game right now is an action game. The devs decided from the alpha test to the beta, they decided to turn it into an action game. And so the people that it attracted, because the devs marketed it and changed it into an action game, are people that like action games. And so the people that came to the game, because it's an action game, are now making feedback and giving suggestions so that the action part of the game, which they came for, because the devs marketed it that way, are giving suggestions to make it a better action game. They're not trying to turn the game into something that it isn't. The devs have already done that, and now the game is something else. This to me is really like those like weird people in the Wuwa community that were like really like just addicted to what the game looked like in like its initial closed beta test, and they're still complaining to this day that the game isn't like the closed beta test for WoWa. The game isn't like the closed beta test from like 2 or 3 years ago. You're like the old man on like his front porch, cleaning his rifle, reminiscing about the old days, like shouting at birds in the sky. That's like what this seems like. Like the game has changed, the game has updated. The devs clearly have a different vision. They're attracting a certain audience of players. And like to say that everybody making a suggestion based off of what the game is now and then saying that they're trying to turn the game. No, the devs have already changed it. This is, I don't like, the framing here is odd.
Or games having unique identities, or the developers having their own vision. It's all just monthly revenue PvP. It is boring, it is exhausting, and I lament the apparent reality that Hypergriff seems to be listening to them. As it stands, the base is the one and only thing meaningfully differentiating Endfield from other gacha games. Thankfully, the majority of people anticipating the game's release do seem to understand how important the base is for that reason. But while it does have tons of room to grow and become even better, I have become convinced it will not. The most optimistic outcome I can believe in is that new regions will have a new gimmick, like Jinlong's fluids and pipes. You build a new base with it over the course of maybe a few days at most. The vast majority of players will be satisfied, and that's where it will end. Gacha games are not conventional games. Fundamentally, the characters are the product, and the game is simply a vessel through which the product is marketed. But reducing all gacha games to this fundamental is boring. They're fun! There's so much potential in the live service model for outstanding single-player games to see years of consistent updates and improvements, to foster thriving communities that conventional games often don't have the lifespan for. Instead, a subset of the communities that already exist are preventing that potential from being realized by consistently pushing new endeavors with unique visions into the same box until they all become homogenized imitations of the same thing.
This is like saying that that Hypergriff is like full of idiots that aren't able to differentiate their game. Like, do you have like no actual trust in the fucking devs to design a combat system that has like unique, like, does it have to be a fucking strategy game to be innovative or unique? Like, do you have no faith that these devs are able to make an action-oriented game that is able to stand out from other action-oriented gacha games? I'm gonna be honest here, like, a part of this video seems like a legitimate just like insult to the devs of Endfield, with the implication that there's no creativity at all with their team and they're not capable of like differentiating. It's a fucking beta. The game still has to release. Is it suddenly like now that the game has a dodge button or has action-oriented combat, there's no way at all that the devs are going to be able to do something different that catches the eyes of the player base or is able to like attract them? I guess that's the thing, right? This guy has no faith at all in the devs. Absolutely no faith at all.
Hypergriff needs to decide if they are content with being that imitation. Because a game for everyone is a game for no one.
You could have said the same exact thing about Wuthering Waves. Oh, this game's combat has a dodge button. Oh, this game's combat has attributes. Oh, this game's combat has like swapping and stuff. Oh, this is gonna be just like Genshin. It's an open world where you walk around with your characters and you swap between them in combat. This is gonna be just like Genshin. There's no originality here. Genshin doesn't have dodge though. Okay, let's relax here. Then Wuthering Waves releases, and it's got similar flow in the combat, right? It had a similar sort of design, but it's a completely different experience as a whole that's super innovative, feels good to play, and is an enjoyable experience for a lot of players, despite just being a copy or being the exact same or just trying to attract like the widest audience possible.
There was a moment while playing through the main story, which I think will stick with me for many years. I was thinking about some moments from the alpha, like Fial's desperate attempts to jump onto this ledge because I was standing on it and admiring certain details on the blighted gigaspawns. My boy was caked up, holy! I happened to be in the Origin Loadspring region at the time, and I noticed why the music for this place in particular felt so eerie. Remember the menu theme I was glazing earlier? Now compare that motif to the music from this part of the map. It invokes a feeling of loss, a feeling of knowing something will never be the same again. And suddenly, I had to stop what I was doing because I was hit with an overwhelming feeling of nostalgia for the alpha.
That had to be one of the fruitiest things I've ever fucking heard. But what the fuck even was that? Nah, I don't. What the fuck was that? Okay. Alright, guys. You remember what I was saying about, like, people that are stuck in the past from, like, development versions of the game? They get one impression of, like, what the game was in the alpha test, and, like, they can't move on past it. Like, they just cannot move on past it. And I think this is not pre-watched.
Are you having fun, Topo?
It's really satisfying, actually. I'm a big fan of it. There's so much potential in what this combat can be. Do you have any other comments on the overall storyline? Okay. I can write an essay for this. I want the story to have a spine and let
OP, after editing the video, grabbed a jar of mayonnaise to spread on his bare chest.
writers take risks. I'll be disappointed if it's dumbed down and basic. Wait, no. Angelina!
Angie, that's not how you abuse gravity.
Angie, no! I'm sorry. I really hope they commit to what they've got here. I think it's sick. Commit to the vision, commit to no dodge and shit. Obviously, like, it needs refining and stuff, but...
You do understand not many people will agree with you.
Yeah, I know. As long as they're actually playing the alpha and understand what the vision is and what it's asking of them, it's totally fine. If they disagree, like, all I can reasonably ask of someone is to think for themselves, right?
I think that's a weird statement to put in. All I can ask is that somebody thinks for themselves. And then we spent a solid 6 minutes just shitting on every single person who decided to make a suggestion to make the game better. Like, we spent 6 minutes, like, actually yelling and screaming because people gave their own personal takes about how to fix the game or how to make the game better.
I can't fucking wait for this game's full release, man. This is a technical alpha. It's like a really bare bones version of this game, and it's already like, I've just been unable to put it down. Just actually insane.
If he disagrees with Enfield's current state, maybe he should take his own advice and understand the game isn't for him and stop playing. You know what? That's actually kind of based and true. Especially when he gave that take of like, if you don't like it, don't play it. Like, can't that literally just be like repackaged, swapped around, and then presented back to him? Like, if you don't like that the game is action, just stop playing it. Like, why are you bitching so much? Genuinely. Like, I'm not even trying to be like a dick about it. I'm just like, if you're this pressed, if you're actually genuinely this pressed about how much stuff in the game is changing and that is becoming more action-oriented, why don't you just stop playing? Like, why is it that everybody else... Why is it that the community has to change? The devs have to change? The mechanics of the game have to change? When the only thing that needs to change is that you stop playing the game and stop complaining about it. Like, it's way less work for him to just stop playing this game than it is for everything else that he's asking to happen. Like, we're invalidating every other person's opinion. We're one guy here, and like, we went ahead and we invalidated like at least 30 different people's opinions because they're from the action genre. When it's like, the one common thread across this entire section is that he has a complaint or like something to bitch about with at least 30 different people. The common thread is him bitching about the suggestions.
I'm so excited, dude. I can't wait.
I don't see why he should stop complaining. He's literally spent 5 minutes telling people that their suggestions and their complaints are bullshit and that they're stupid and that they should just quit the game because of the suggestions that they're making. Can't you just literally take the entire narrative that he has and just flip it around and then Uno reverse it back to him? He's complaining about other people's complaints. Like, he just shits on every single person that has a suggestion to make the game better. Why does he get a pass to shit on everybody else, but nobody can tell him to just stop playing the game. He's an OG AK player. Does being an OG player suddenly mean that your opinion is worth more? Why should anybody care that he's an OG player? What about him being an OG player suddenly makes his opinion worth more? It's crazy how much Saint wants Genshin Impact 2. Saint is actually brain dead, can't even read any comments fully. You do realize this is why everybody makes fun of the Arknights community? This is why people can't actually take the Arknights community seriously. Because every single time your game is discussed and people aren't glazing the shit out of it, you say the most dented fucking things. It's unbelievable. You actually do end up saying the most dented things possible. And this is just one example of it. I don't even understand what type of, what could even lead to a response like this. But there are people who can't play games like Wuwa, ZZZ, etc. just because they have systems from Genshin. Not every game has to be an open world or artifact grind simulator. And you would complain too if Wuwa 2 becomes a different game from what it is now. So I just won't play it. If it becomes an entirely different game, that doesn't appeal to me because the devs are clearly trying to do something else and attract a bigger player base, then I'll just go play a different game. I'm not gonna go ahead and actually genuinely just live in the past. And I think the big thing is I wouldn't do whatever the fuck is going on over here, because I'm not gonna lie, this is some of the weirdest and craziest shit I've ever seen. I'm gonna be entirely honest here. I have no fucking idea what is going on during this section of the video. You would just give it up without a fight? Endfield is not even slightly like the original Arknights. Even in the alpha test, it was nothing like the original Arknights. In the original Arknights, it's a fucking tower defense game. So this analogy that you just made about it being completely, it already is different. Have you seen base Arknights versus Enfield's alpha or Enfield's beta? It's a fucking 2D tower defense game. Enfield is already entirely different. And so they come out with the game in the alpha. It's basically sort of like an RTS almost thing where you control the different characters and move around. They decide, okay, this sort of RTS-based playstyle isn't something that appeals to a lot of players. Let's make it more action-oriented. I'm sorry if you're somebody that wanted Enfield to be more of an RTS. I don't think that the devs necessarily owe anything to anybody, considering the game's in mid-development, and they're simply deciding to turn it into more of an action game because that's the feedback that they've been getting to make the game better. And so the devs are clearly acting on some level of feedback to make the game as good as it can be. And the decision that they landed on as a development team over at Hypergriff was to make it an action game. But let's be entirely real here. The Endfield Alpha that this guy is talking about, that was not even close to the baseline Arknights gameplay anyways. It's still entirely, completely 1,000,000% different from the Arknights that's live right now. And so there's not even the whole, wouldn't you complain if it was an entirely different game? It already is. It already was in the alpha. It's already a completely different game. But it seems veteran players of Arknights don't want it to change. Don't want what to change? Enfield is not a fucking tower defense game. It's already completely different. It already has changed. I guess this is the thing. How is it that the OG Arknights players have any actual sway in the conversation when OG Arknights is a fucking tower defense and then the alpha version of Enfield was a fucking RTS? How does it even matter what the OG players think or what the OG players think? It's not like the alpha version was even in any way similar because they share the same fan base. Oh boy. I don't think the game should be an action game. A tactical game is way more open, especially when games like NTE and Nanta and more action gotchas are coming out. Okay, all right. So I guess you know better than the devs. I guess you know better than the devs who are sending out feedback reports to the players that played the alpha, compiled all the feedback that they got from the alpha, and then decided to make the game more action-oriented. I guess that your opinion and your take supersedes all of the research that the devs did and all the feedback that the devs got from their alpha. I guess that's what we're just gonna say here. I would just imagine that the devs might know better about which direction to put the game. I guess the take over here is the devs are stupid. They fucked up by turning it into an action game. They have no idea what they're doing. And the community just knows better. The community is the him here. They know better than the devs. They know better than all of the feedback forms the devs have been getting. We should just do what the community says. Fuck everything else that the devs have been doing. This entire argument kind of just boils down to devs are stupid. Marketing, research and development, the entire squad at Hypergriff is just stupid. They should just put back in the game what they had in the alpha, because every change they made for the beta, completely clueless devs. Is that kind of just the argument now? I am just suggesting that the game leans more to the tactical side, and the devs decided they don't want to do that for some reason. There is never a community that acts like this except the Arknights one. I swear to God. They have like just the weirdest reasoning on planet Earth. Everything that they say, it's just like, it really genuinely just boils down into, we know the most. We're an OG Arknights player, and so our opinion means more than every other person in the conversation. And if you're not an OG Arknights player, you're irrelevant. It's so weird. It is really just such a weird vibe that they introduce, and they force it in every single conversation. I'm an OG Arknights player, and so I'm entitled to have my opinion, but everybody else, go fuck yourself.
I'm so excited, dude. I can't wait. It feels a little weird to talk about it this way because it was literally only a year ago, but I'm making this video in the first place because I need to express how it made me feel. I had so much optimism for what the game could be.
Okay.
But now that optimism is becoming silent lamentation.
All right, I guess you're just gonna have to quit the
continues
game.
on the path it's currently on, every gacha developer with an eye on this game will see the trend. Originality is overrated, and the path to success lies in imitation.
Okay, we definitely are saying the devs are stupid and the game is gonna EOS now.
The men in suits will take notice, and unique, interesting ideas with oceans of potential will not even see the light of sunrise. Enfield is a dying canary in a coal mine.
The game hasn't even released yet. The devs have already said that they're making changes to optimize the gameplay. You haven't even seen what the changes are. And now we're saying it's gonna EOS. Were there actually people saying that, like, this video was, like, fucking amazing? Like, this video, like, changes everything? Guys, this is what Doomposting looks like. This is Doomposting. 1,000,000%. This is, like, the most clear-cut example of genuine Doomposting I might have ever seen. I'm gonna be entirely honest here. This is like, this should be the dictionary definition of Doomposting.
That canary may not be dead yet, but I am not at all convinced Hypergriff is interested in saving it.
It's well received from Tectone and Jenna, so that means I have to have the same opinion. So I'm forced to have the same opinion as Tectone and Jenna. Yo, you're doing tricks on it right now, bro.
What could have been the harbinger of a golden age could instead doom itself to be the death knell of gacha games. I have given every possible piece of feedback I can give to the developers, and so I have done all that I can to convince them to remain faithful to the vision they clearly had.
Is their vision not allowed to change? Are they not allowed to have, like, a different reimagining of what they want for the game and to implement it to attract a wider audience?
For now, I can only hope the decisions which need to be made will be made by those who are just as enchanted with that vision as I am. And I won't be left.
So basically, it's just, this guy really liked the alpha version of the game. The devs got feedback from the alpha version of the game that certain changes should be made to make the game better. The devs implement that feedback, the game becomes more action-oriented, and now this dude is like, it's now going to fucking EOS. The devs should go back to alpha, or this game is going to EOS. This is a 30-minute video about the game just being a better version of itself in the alpha. Is that the video?
Wondering what could have been.
Okay, I guess that's the end. A lot of padding in there. I gotta say, this video was a little, I mean, this video felt really Doomposty to me. Like, especially over here where we started just kind of like shitting on people who came to an action game and then gave suggestions about how the action combat could be better. Because the game changed into more of an action game during its beta. And then more action players came to it, and then they gave suggestions on how to make the action part of the game better. And I guess this is the thing. It's an intentional decision by the devs to do that because they believe that that's what's going to make the game the most successful. I think it's perfectly fine for somebody to have a disagreement with that vision, but to kind of like go ahead and like mock and call every person that's just trying to make the action part of the game better and basically insinuate that they're stupid and start, let's be honest here, screaming at them for their terrible garbage suggestions. I honestly thought it was a little bit unhinged. I thought this video was a little bit weird. That's just my take. I think that the game, personally, should lean into more action aspects, but then think of different ways to spice it up to make sure that it differentiates itself enough as an action title. And I think there's plenty of innovation opportunities in the space. I personally have a baseline level of trust and faith in the developers so that, you know, I'm not going to think that the devs are completely incapable and are not able to differentiate or innovate on the action RPG genre. I think that they'll do a fine job. It's just about spicing it up a little bit and moving forward from there. I'd rather trust the devs and see what they put in the final version than, I guess, just like Doompost and insinuate the game is gonna, you know, fucking EOS, because it's not. I'd rather not insinuate that the game is going to EOS because it's not like the alpha. Let me know what you all thought. Peace.